Hello everyone, welcome to class. This is the second lecture for the week of August 27th. I'll have another one up tomorrow night, and then from now on we will have 2 lectures per week. I just got super excited this week or something. Anyway, you may notice I'm wearing my Red for Ed. Wednesdays are Red for Ed days in South Carolina to promote education. I hope you're on board with that at the very least. And let's look at some realistic fiction tonight, all right? All right, you guys all come from a variety of backgrounds. Some of you have education backgrounds and some of you do not. And so I can't count on the fact that you've had adolescent development. So our learning outcomes, you will be able to understand the stages of adolescent development, learn the definition of YA Lit, learn about the history of YA Lit, understand gender issues in young adult literature, learn about some realistic fiction for young adults, including LGBTQ and urban lit, and learn about required LGBTQ titles or our suggested ones, biographies and autobiographies on your reading list. Hopefully you've already read your first chapter or first couple chapters in the Michael Cart book, but to define young adult, it's ages 13 through 19, so essentially your teenagers. Young Adult Library Services Association defines it as 12 through 18 or grades 6 through 12. They emerge as juvenile readers and leave as adult readers. I think that's optimistic, actually. There are plenty of 18-year-olds who leave and they're still enmeshed in young adult or even juvenile literature. And then there are some people who are 48 who really like young adult literature and have never outgrown it. I'm not pointing any fingers or anything. So those who think they're too old to be children, but who others think are too young to be adults, classic teenagers. And that's a quote from Nielsen and Donaldson. So the stages of adolescent development. If you don't have kids already, my pediatrician actually gives us little handouts that have these some of these things on them when I take my kids for their annual checkups. So stage 1, early adolescence. Concern about appearance. Gosh, that doesn't go away. It's there through all of adolescence. But anyway, early adolescence, they seek more independence from family, can sometimes be rebellious, and are very susceptible to peer pressure and find friends way more important than they used to. Stage 2, middle adolescence. They're slightly less self-absorbed. I'm not sure I completely agree with that, but slightly less. They make their own decisions. They have values and morality, and I'll tell you they're willing to argue that with you. They're intellectually and sexually aware. That's frightening as a parent. And they seek out adventures and some risk, also frightening as a parent. Stage 3, late adolescence. They have an idealistic view of the world, which is why my older son is going to be a teacher, or he thinks he is. Anyway, gotta help him. Involved with the world outside of home and school. They definitely want to get away from their parents. They set goals. They seek independence. And relationships stabilize. They see adults as equals. That's amusing to me with a college freshman. Anyway, yes, they do stabilize somewhat, and they start seeing their parents as less stupid or other adults as less stupid. That's nice. What are young adult materials? Obviously, there is the huge market for young adult books and ebooks, audiobooks and playaways, though I tell you in my own library I have struggled to get the playaways to go out. That doesn't seem to be a format that's real popular. And it may have to do with marketing on my part, but I've struggled with those. Periodicals and digital magazines. I'm also struggling a little bit to market periodicals to young adults. Even when they're sitting around waiting for stuff, they'd much rather look at their phone. Movies and DVDs. They're definitely big consumers of movies, just maybe in a different way than older adults are. They're much more willing to watch stuff on a phone or a smaller screen. Video games, oh my gosh, they're huge. I need to do some sort of Fortnite display in my library. If you like Fortnite, you should read whatever. I've seen lots of postings about them and haven't done them, and I know for a fact that there are several kids, including one of my own, that is addicted to Fortnite. So definitely want to tie into that. And then zines, and I don't see zines as being a big influence anymore. I would say that a lot of young adult material actually goes out on news feeds on their phones. I need to investigate that more. And I would love to hear from you guys about that too. So let's define young adult literature to some extent. You can say it's anything that a young adult reader would choose to read for pleasure or to fulfill school assignments, though I don't think most young adult readers would choose to read the Picture of Dorian Gray, which one of my kids had to read this summer. Though it's a great book, I don't think that quite counts because it got assigned. So anyway, terminology: YA lit, teenage or teen books, adolescent literature, or tweener books for middle school kids. And very often the central theme is that of becoming an adult, answering the question of who am I and what am I going to do about it, or what am I going to do with my life. That may be part of why I like young adult lit so much, is that I still haven't figured out what I'm going to do with my life, even though I've been a high school librarian for 20 years. So why bother with young adult literature? Why don't we have them reading classics? There are lots of adult books that young adults can access and enjoy, but I'm completely sold on this. You want to give kids things that they want to read, things that interest them, something that's engaging to them so that they develop a lifelong reading habit. It's even more important now when they're like constantly bombarded by computer screens, phone screens, everything else. There's all sorts of studies that show reading books, particularly fiction books, encourage more empathy in the reader and are good for your blood pressure. I mean, I think kids are stressed out. And I think a lot of them can act like turds. So fiction can cure that. I'm sold. Also, if you read the Hipple article, that of whatever they want to read, I try not to be judgmental about what kids ask for in my high school library. I'm super judgy and I try to keep a lid on it. So I try to help kids find what they want. Read what they want. And I think I've mentioned in something or in talking to one of you that I'm not fond of urban literature and need to read more of it because I have a large population that really, really likes it. And I'm like, ooh, but I don't make that face or noise when they ask me for it because that's not my job. So our role is to find that. For many of my students, it's urban literature. And there are over 1,200 YA books published each year. So there's a huge both market and choice of good stuff for kids to read. So part of what we're doing in our class is looking at what's out there so that you're ready when someone comes up and says, oh, I really like adventure books. And you're like, well, I don't read that. Well, hopefully you've read something in this class that has adventure in it so that you can recommend something. All right, so you have a history of young adult literature. In the past, it was very didactic. The 1800s, the earliest literature for young people was very pedantic, moralistic. It talks about religion or good behavior, a lot of times in religious publications. You've got, for girls, you have domestic focus with morality. They're very sentimental. They're treacly. And for young men, you had the dime store excitement serial novels where you've got adventure, you've got swashbuckling, you've got westerns, you've got all that good stuff that's really fun but not very original or inspiring. Some of the first books written for YAs, in 1868 you have Louisa May Alcott's Little Women, and you have Horatio Alger's Ragged Dick. I have trouble saying that. I'm sorry. That cracks me up. Anyway, Street Life in New York. And then, of course, if you read your textbook, there's a discussion of one of the early columns for young adults called Boy Meets Girl by the author named Gayhead, which also made me crack up. I hope that you're more mature than I am. All right, in the 1900s, you've got some of the Stratemeyer's Literary Syndicate, those series books. I read a bunch of these growing up, not Tom Swift, but I definitely read the Bobbsey Twins and Nancy Drew and some Hardy Boys. I'm probably showing my age. I wonder if you guys read any of those. In 1942, 17th Summer came out. That's a new writing for teenagers, and it was definitely the sort of romance for young women, the idealized teenage life, Bobby Sox type stuff. And then in 1967, The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton and The Contender by Lipsyte came out. 68, you had The Pigman by Paul Zindel. And this is the beginning of the sort of problem novel, a realistic fiction where it's discussing real issues for young people. There is a long-standing debate over what is the first young adult book. And part of our required reading is a couple of selections that could be considered the first young adult books. So I've chosen The Outsiders and The Chocolate War as some early young adult or seminal works for young adults. But there are plenty of arguments that there are other ones. So there's also BK listserv thread about the history of young adult literature, and several people argue that it's 17th Summer or The Outsiders. It doesn't really matter. I just want you guys to have some sort of perspective on what could be the first young adult or what some of the first books were, so you get an idea of what, when you're reading new stuff, what's it building on and where it came from. So when did the literary world and the publishing industry acknowledge that teens were a marketable audience, deserving of books? Post-World Wars, there was definitely a rise in college attendance and teens with more income. Michael Cart, of course, discusses this pretty thoroughly in the book also, so make sure you're checking out the text. So I definitely want to give you a little background on young adult literature, but of course, we're going to be focusing on what you're going to be doing now as you go out in your careers to promote reading to young adults. So we have 21st century learners. They are easily distracted and want to be entertained. They are comfortable with new technologies and have transliteracies and are much more comfortable with multitasking than at least I am. And you may have more multitasking skills, as I think many of you are much younger. They have new attitudes about reading, attitudes very frequently that I don't like attitudes that are straight up, I don't like to read, reading is boring, there's nothing for me to read, that type of thing. We need to be working very hard to hook kids. Fortunately, there's great literature out there that can help us to hook kids on reading. One of the great things about young adult literature is that it is written at a huge variety of reading levels so that we can differentiate instruction. That I do think it's appropriate to have Wimpy Kid in a high school because kids like it, and some high school kids don't read well. So I've been on a discussion list about that recently. We want to encourage multiculturalism and diversity. My high school is about a 60-40 split, as far as 60% African American and 40% white, which is not quite accurate because there's a smattering of Hispanics and Asians in there also. But I do try to make sure that my collection reflects my population. That's tricky though, because there aren't as many African American authors out there, so it's hard to get have my balance, my collection reflect the racial balance in my school. There are lots of burning issues out there. I've tried to make sure at least some of our selections reflect some of the hot topics. So what does the future hold for young adult literature? I think it's very hot right now. It continues to be hot and has been for at least 10 years, but let's talk about things in the future too. So in the words of Michael Cart, teenagers urgently need books that speak with relevance and immediacy to their real lives and to their unique emotional, intellectual, and developmental needs. But books can't do that unless their authors trust young readers with the truth. I have been a longtime fan of Michael Cart. He is definitely a guru, and there are sometimes where I look at his picture, I'm like, why is this old white guy still relevant? But he is. So I think perhaps he's got a case of arrested development, though he's probably not quite as immature as I am. And he gets kids, so he gets the YA lit. And I think he's right. Kids see through BS. They see through bad writing. But when you find literature that really is good, that's authentic, they know it, and that's part of our sales pitch. We've got to find those so that we can sell them to our students or to our young people. More Michael Cart, and this is a large part of what I feel like is my purpose. YA Lit invests young hearts and minds with tolerance, understanding, empathy, acceptance, compassion, kindness, and more. It civilizes them, in short. I'm not sure that's completely possible. However, that developing empathy in young people, in everyone, I think is crucial to our survival as a society. How'd you like that soapbox? Well, realistic fiction is not always my first choice. There's some great stuff out there. If you haven't read any John Green, read some John Green. He's amazing. All right, so besides that, some markers for realistic fiction. Events in the story did not really happen, but they could happen. It reflects life as it could be lived today. It very often is a problem novel. The characters are true to life. You feel like you could know them or meet them. It has a wide variety of genres and topics, and it is divided into contemporary and historical fiction. I will tell you my experience, and a lot of the research says kids are not fond of historical fiction. I like it, but kids don't. So when you're trying to sell stuff, you're going to have to do a hard sell on the historical fiction for sure. Realistic fiction has moved away from that didactic, teach the reader a lesson type of stuff. Thank heavens, that stuff's hard to handle. To the coming of age titles of the 60s and 70s. Some of those 60s and 70s titles are grim, including the two that we are reading for class, The Outsiders, or one you're choosing, and The Chocolate War. Those are grim, sorry. Teens find characters experience the same things that they face, so those difficulties, like one current one that talks about sort of family abuse and abusive stepfather, is Eleanor and Park. I don't know if anybody's read that. That's a great one that came out recently. Issues include relationships, sexual experiences, sexual identity, death, bullying, violence, suicide, alcohol, drugs, gangs, homelessness, and mental health. Realistic fiction also has characters and settings that reflect a variety of social economic levels, very often contrasting economic levels or social levels to create drama. Often has the use of colloquial language, but you have to be careful when you're purchasing these because, for several reasons, you want to be careful because it can be dated very quickly. You also want to think about how tolerant your community is of profanity. There's a book called Fat Kid Rules the World where it's got the F word all over the place. I warn kids about it, but that book is hilarious. Also sad. Sad and hilarious at the same time, but there's a whole bunch of the F word, so I warn kids. I do purchase a bunch of stuff with curse words. I just walk down the halls and hear it all the time. I can't believe any parent would get upset over it. And I haven't had anybody complain to me about curse words in a book that's in my library, just so you know. And one place to look for realistic fiction is the H.W. Wilson Core Collection's Realistic Fiction. I will also say that if you are working in a school library, your book jobber may have ways you can select online. You can say, oh, what's all the newest realistic fiction? And they'll send you a list or even have a prepared list. So that is one way to do your purchasing. I don't know how, I'm assuming that the public libraries have the same sort of book jobber. I just have not used one, just so you know. I just want to let you know from my experience, because I've been in a high school library for 20 years now, holy schmoly, LGBTQ literature has really blossomed in the past 10 years. When I first started as a school librarian, it was hard to find titles with a gay character, with any kind of alternative lifestyle. And about 10 years ago, things really, really picked up. Or I noticed that things picked up. They may have been picking up beforehand, and I'm just clueless sometimes. So LGBTQ stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or queer. The books range widely in sensitivity, topic, quality, political, and social insight. To just let you know how few things used to be published from 1969 to 76, only 5 novels were published with gay and lesbian themes. The first one is called I'll Get There, It Better Be Worth the Trip by Donovan in 1969. Children's books regarding the GLBT experience are critical tools in teaching tolerance, acceptance, and the importance of diversity. That's from the ALA president, Roberta Stevens. I've had a couple people, classmates of mine actually at USC in the PhD program, have poked at me like, what's in your collection? What's in your collection? You know, have you looked? What have you got? And it did prompt me to go look a little bit more closely. I was actually pleasantly surprised. I've got a good number of titles. There are now awards for LGBTQ literature. The market is much larger. It's just much more open. There are many more articles and conference presentations on this literature section or genre. There's also the ALA's Stonewall Book Awards that started in 1971. It recently added the Children's and Young Adult Literature Award to bring more awareness and accolades to writers about this topic. All right, and some quick previews of some LGBTQ lit that you might want to pick for that genre or that area to read in. So first title, Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe by Benjamin Alir Saenz from 2012. This brings readers the tale of 15-year-old loner Aristotle Mendoza and his friendship with Dante Quintana. Saenz exquisitely captures the story of two boys on the edge of manhood by addressing the issues of identity, friendship, and family and love. Saenz pushes beyond geography, sexuality, and cultural identity to create a truly universal novel. This got the Pura Belpré Award. That was the announcement that went with it. So a recognized choice, a good choice for this particular selection or this area if you're interested. I'll Give You the Sun is by Jandy Nelson. This has been popular in my high school library. It won the 2015 Stonewall Honor. It was an honor book. It was a Prince Award winner. It was on the top 10 best fiction for young adults. It was the Rainbow List top 10 for 2015. It's the story of Jude and her twin brother Noah. They are incredibly close. At 13, isolated Noah draws constantly and is falling in love with the charismatic boy next door, while daredevil Jude cliff dives and wears red lipstick and does the talking for both of them. But 3 years later, Jude and Noah are barely speaking. Something happened to wreck the twins in different and dramatic ways. And that's from WorldCat. And obviously, that's another example of you've got a bit of a cliffhanger. You learn a little bit about the characters and then want to learn more. Their option would be The Porcupine of Truth by Bill Konigsberg. This was published in 2015. Bill Konigsberg also published or wrote Openly Straight. This book, The Porcupine of Truth, is an epic road trip. There's family history, gay history, and of course the girlfriend that our hero can't have, the grandfather he never knew, and The Porcupine of Truth. That's from Amazon. It was a Booklist starred review, School Library Journal starred review. And here's a little blurb from the publisher. Start at the hot girl. Carson Smith isn't thrilled to be spending the summer with his estranged dad in Billings, Montana, but then he meets Aisha Stinson, the most beautiful girl he's ever seen, and the smartest, and the funniest. They connect like he never has with anyone, but also she's a lesbian, so there's that. A great book with that sort of universal theme of wanting the one you can't have. So even though one of the main characters is lesbian, lots of kids can relate to this one. Two books that address being transgender or transitioning. One of them is Rethinking Normal by Katie Rain Hill. It's from Simon & Schuster in 2014. Let's see, I'll just read a little bit of it. In her unique, generous, and affecting voice, 19-year-old Katie Hill shares her personal journey of undergoing gender reassignment. So, true story, a memoir. This would be a great addition to a high school collection. I don't think I have this. I'm going to have to go to school and look. And I have not read this one. And then another one Some Assembly Required, and that's by Erin Andrews. The Not So Secret Life of Erin Andrews, the former boyfriend of Katie Rain Hill, was published at the same time. So this both put an empathetic human face on a condition that otherwise might be presented as coldly clinical. Why would you have these in your collection? Because in my 20 years in a high school, I have probably, I think I've had about 8 transgendered students that I was aware of. So they're there. You will have transgendered students. There's one in my school right now who I believe is transitioning. So it's happening. You're going to see students, and once again, you want your collection to reflect. So you're probably not going to have 100 books on transgenders, but you probably want some. So just keep that in mind. Two Boys Kissing by David Levithan from 2013. I hope you've read something by this author. He's delightful. I really enjoy his books. This is based on the true event story of Harry and Craig, two 17-year-olds who are no longer a couple, yet are about to take part in a 32-hour marathon of kissing to set a new Guinness World Record. This was an ALA Best Book for Young Adults, a 2014 Stonewall Honor Book, and named to the 2013 National Book Award longlist. According to David Levithan, a story doesn't have to always reflect reality. It can create reality as well. I would definitely say that Levithan has a knack for creating new realities that are very accessible. Will Grayson by John Green and David Levithan from 2009. This is a little bit older, but it has the glory of having both John Green and David Levithan writing it. And it's written in alternating voices. So when two teens, one gay and one straight, meet accidentally and discover that they share the same name, their lives become intertwined as one begins dating the other's best friend, who produces a play revealing his relationship with them both. So it's not only excellent authors, but it's kind of clever too. All right, there's more to come, but this is long enough for this evening, and I will post another one tomorrow, and then I promise you'll just have 2 lectures a week, and I'll get our rhythm settled down so you don't feel as jammed. All right, take care, and I will post some more tomorrow. Bye.